Hello, my name is Bill Davidson, Senior Consultant with Critical Design Associates. Today, I'd like to welcome you to our presentation of Ivanti's Service Management, Preparing to Go Live. As we prepare to go live, we want to establish the tenants that we're going to be using, production, staging, and UAT. We also want to do testing in our UAT environment to assure that the configuration that we've done meets all the needs of the customer group and the administrators that we're working with. Once that's done, production go live is really just a matter of publishing the tenant URL to the users so that they have access to it and deciding that we're going to roll. In a SaaS environment, we've been doing our configuration in the staging tenant, but now we need to get a UAT tenant set up so that we can do testing. And once that testing is complete and all the changes that may be recommended have been incorporated, we're going to get them to create a production tenant for us and synchronize everything together. For on-premise, we'll need to install the environment for development. And in all cases, we're going to want to clean out the demo and test data before we do go live. But here we're going to create the staging and UAT tenants using the Ops console. Let's go ahead and create our development environment and our tenants. Here we're going to go to our installers. We'll run our installer Ivanti Service and Asset Manager as administrator. Go ahead and install the prerequisites. Once that's complete, we'll go ahead and select Next, accept the license agreement, install our Service Manager application. We'll select the directory we want that to go into, and we'll be doing a custom install. This time when we install it, we're going to include the Ops console. Let's begin the installation. Once the installer is completed, we'll be brought back to the System Configuration Wizard. Here we want to select Multiple Server Deployment. We'll click the pull down, make sure production is unchecked, staging and UAT are checked, and our production configuration server, which is our production server, is listed. We'll OK that. We also want to get the configuration database name is going to be called configdb.dev to distinguish it from the configuration database of configdb that we used for production. Let's go ahead and load that database. We'll test the connection first. And once that is done, we'll go ahead and load our configuration database. Here, we'll have to tell it where we want the database to be stored. We can choose where we want it stored here. If we're happy with that, we'll just OK it. And once it's loaded, we'll click on Next. Scroll down to the bottom. The first thing we want to note is that for the domain name, we're going to change this to call it dev. We're also going to enter our license file and our password for our administrator account for the configuration application. The first name and last name, and an email address. And proceed forward. In the Service Manager settings, we're going to go ahead and use ISM, but this time we'll call it STG for the database name. We'll test the connection, and you notice that we cannot create that database at this point. We'll use the Ops console to do that. Going ahead and moving to the next window. Our configuration server location and host name will be this server. And we'll see that we have some information about staging and production, where the landscapes are going to be called and where their database server is located. We're also going to be using this host for the ops console, but I'm not concerned with surveys or reporting on this server, so we'll just move forward. In our other feature settings window, we're going to just use C logs and temp in the C location and the heat cache in the default location. You'll notice that the application server in this case is our local server and our inbound web server is our local server. We'll go ahead and move forward. We're taken to the upgrade, just like in production. We'll need to upgrade the system because of the difference in the metadata package version. And here we'll enter our HSW admin and our password. Select OK and wait for it to run through the upgrade. The upgrade has been completed, so we'll go ahead and go next. In this case, we're not concerned with the metrics server because we want our UAT users to be focusing on what they need to do to test the modules that they're involved with. Go ahead and finish. And we'll need to restart our system. Logging back into our system, we can see that we have the Ivanti Service Management URL, but we haven't actually loaded the system databases. So let's do that to create our UAT and staging tenants. We're going to go to Start, and this time we'll pick Heat Software, our Operations Console, and we're going to run that. And here I've installed Chrome on my system because it works a little better with the Operations Console. I'm going to grab the URL from from Internet Explorer and copy that into Chrome. Will take me to the login page where we use our HSW admin user and password to log in. And now we can see the tenants that we've created. First thing we notice is that we have the central config database describing the arrangement of server and configuration for the production server. We also have our development. And down here we can see the tenant for the production server. If we hit Manage Migration, we'll see all of our landscapes described. We have our production tenant, we have our staging tenant, and we have our UAT. But there's no information in those. So let's take the content of production and move it to staging. Here, I'm going to keep the existing users. I'm going to create this from a live SQL backup. And since we're not using reporting, we'll need to delete the DB user for reporting and the password. And once we've done that, we can simply execute and OK that. We'll wait a couple of minutes and we'll see that our staging instance has been created. This isn't actually a warning, it's just letting us know that it did that. Go ahead and OK that. We'll do the same thing for our UAT environment. Click OK, and we can see that we now have a staging and a UAT tenant created. We can close out of the Heat Operations console now. Let's log in now and take a look at our tenants. We'll double click, enter our username, and remember your user, our user has been brought over from the production environment. And you notice in the drop down here we have three different things. Configuration, that's where we were with our HSW admin. There's staging. Let's look at staging. Once we've gone live, we'll be using the staging environment to do any changes or updates that we need to do the system so that we'll be able to test those and move them to production in a safe fashion. Let's log out. We'll go ahead and log in now to the UAT tenant, and it's an identical copy. All of them are identical copies. Now we can let our user group that we've selected do some additional testing. When they're going to be logging into the UAT tenant to do testing, and they'll probably keep some notes of the things that they might want to see that we could implement. If they do, if we're in SaaS, we'll go back to the staging tenant to do that. If we're in premise, we're going to go to the production tenant to make those changes. Once we've made changes in our production tenant to satisfy our users, we're going to go back to our operations console, and we're going to select the manage migration on the production tenant. Now here we have an option that we can take our production environment and move it to staging and to UAT to refresh everything to make sure that what our users see is also what we had in our production environment and our staging environment. So we'll do a push this time, and we're going to do a copy to replace. I like to use the live backup, and I like to keep the existing users, and we'll skip the tenant target backup in this case because we can always restore it again. And we'll repeat that process for UAT to make sure everybody is on the same page. Now at this point we can close the ops console. Everybody is synchronized together, and we've implemented whatever changes our UAT test group asked for us to do. So they can log back into UAT to verify those changes. And if we're done, then we're ready to go live, or at least enable our production tenant. One other thing that we might want to do is clear out data, and we can do this before we do the migration, or we can do it afterwards. But let's take a look at how we might do that. We'll go to the heat production tenant and run a query. We'll be providing you or utilizing a standard cleanup that we have. Just running that SQL script against heat SM in this case. We could run it against any of the databases that are used for staging UAT or HSM, heat SM. If we run it against heat SM before we do the movement of the database through the ops console, then that will be reflected in staging and UAT. Now, once we are complete with our testing, we're going to ask that we create the production tenant if we're in SaaS, and we'll have all of the tenants synchronized together. We'll remove the test data. We'll make sure that we've synchronized all of our tenants if we're at an on-premise, and we've removed all the test and demo data. And at that point, we're basically ready to go live. All we need to do is give the URL for our production tenant to our users, and they can get going with the application. So we'll publish that URL. There are a few cases where we have complex implementations. Let's say that we want to bring up the service desk or the help desk first and let them work with the application for a while before we bring up the rest of the user community, for example, our self-service users. There are also cases where we might bring up incident, say, and then later we want to implement change. And we can do that in a phased operation. So we'll look at how we can update and upgrade our application in the next WebEx that we have, which will be updating and upgrading our application. And this will apply to once we've gone live. Sure appreciate your attendance today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.